I'm Will Reuter, and this is HBA After Hours, a podcast from the Home Builders Association of Greater Kansas City. Welcome to another episode of the HBA After Hours podcast, a podcast produced by the Home Builders Association of Greater Kansas City. Today's episode is brought to you by McCray Lumber and Nebraska Furniture Mart. As always, I'm your host, Will Reuter, Executive Vice President here at the KCHBA, and with me as co-host is...
Keith Sauro, publisher of Design KC and the Real Estate Book and New Home Guide. And when you say the announcement, we should actually crack a beer.
Well, that's true. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. We got our sound technician.
We did it.
On that. And
who is that sound
because
technician?
There's no way we would possibly do that.
No
we're
way.
Recording a podcast.
But it's after hours.
We're professionals. That's right. But we've got a really fun and exciting conversation for you today. We're with David Elliott of Construction Planning Services here in Kansas City. And David, why don't you say hey to the folks?
Hey. Glad to be here. Good to see you, Will, Keith, always. We have a good time together.
We do.
So looking forward to this. Let's get it on and see what goes on here.
All right, David, I want to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, kind of how you find yourself at a table talking to us about home building in the Kansas City metro.
I don't think you have enough time.
Try me.
I started
Don't
off.
say that.
Well, I was going to say, that was a bluff that's going to get called, I know.
I started off coming out of high school, went to year college, and went to work in the oil fields. I worked 6 years in the oil fields, very interesting job. Jimmy Buffett had a great comment in a song, I made enough money to buy Miami, but I pissed it away so fast. That's kind of who we were. We were work hard, play hard guys and traveled all over the world. My wife, I married her from Boston and took her out to Elk City, Oklahoma. That didn't go so well for her. I came back from Columbia, South America, and she insisted that we go back to New England. So I went back and got a job running a truck crane for a guy because I ran all kinds of equipment. And he was a framer. And I got the hydraulics working. The truck motor was a piece of crap. And I'd get out halfway to the job and the damn thing break down. And they were going to let me go. And his partner looked at me and said, well, see if he wants to swing a hammer. I said, yeah, I'll swing a hammer, let's go. So within a year and a half, I was a foreman for him because I've been running crews in the oil field already, so that wasn't a big deal. It was just having to learn a new trade. And I started framing in 1984. So at this point, I've been doing it for 40 years. So I built ski condos and all kinds of different type of buildings, worked up in the mountains, lived up in the mountains, worked up on the coast of Maine, building a rear admiral's house one time right outside of Bahaba. That's B-A-H-A-B-A, by the way.
That's how it's pronounced.
Yes, thank you.
It's a 25-letter alphabet.
It is.
Not in Maine.
There's no R's. There's no R's.
No, Maine's a different place, I can promise you that. You know, it's a country unto
You
itself.
can't get that
From here.
Right.
So anyway, had a chance to come back here. My wife was running a resort in North Conway, New Hampshire, and the day after Christmas, the Frenchie that was owning us, Claude Roncourt, went broke. He went bankrupt, and we lost her job and our housing. And my grandmother died in Paola, Kansas, and we came back here. And my grandfather talked me into coming back, and I had no intention of leaving New England, but times were pretty thin out there. We were struggling to make some money. And I was 32 years old, and I finally got to the place where I kind of got to the point where I realized I didn't know shit, which is really a great place to be.
Yeah, we all get to that place at some point in our life, right?
You get to learn all kinds of things after that, right? And ended up hanging steel that winter, and I found my first job with C&P Construction in May of '91. Rocky and Cole had started C&P in 1966. We're currently in our 59th year. So we'll have 60 next year, and we will party, I can promise you that. Went to work for them within a year and a half again. Once I learned about Kansas City framing, which is just, our architectural market here is just wonderful. This framer's paradise with all the chopped up houses and the roofs chopped up like they are, and our techniques of building with tilt framing. Back in the day, we'd put the windows and everything in there. They won't let us do that anymore, but we still have pretty advanced methods as far as framing goes. Anyway, I worked for them. I went to work for old HBA member, Larry Weiss.
Sure.
Weiss Construction out of Blue Springs. The late Larry Weiss, God bless his soul, framed for him for almost probably 17, 18 years. I don't know how many houses I built for him, just a bunch. And in May of '07, I had been in negotiation with the guys to buy the company from him. So I'm just a C-average high school student, failed in college, and just thought I could do this. I had a side business. I'd made enough money on my side business to make an offer. And we did a buyout. And so they took the deal. I think they probably regretted it pretty early on. I just remember running my first payroll out there. It was only $20,000, and I was just about to, crap a brick over that. That was more money than I'd ever had to deal with in my time. Now I've had payrolls over $50,000, so it's just a relative thing now. But was able to get in and get my teeth into it, and then we had the Obama recession. Wow, what a great time. Probably went 3 years without a paycheck. My wife, fortunately, was a vice president of a bank, and I learned to do dishes. I'm still doing dishes. She does her nails and spends a lot of money down at Beauty Brand still. So, in fact, I think they I think they got her
Beauty
picture on
Brand's
the wall
a
down there
sponsor
now.
today, I think.
Well, I think they're going to be.
They're
next
gonna
time.
be
They are.
As soon as
They
we get done
certainly
here,
are
we're going to make that call.
Referred to by Michelle. Yeah, very much so.
First name basis down there.
Yeah, absolutely,
That's right.
absolutely.
Name drop.
So anyway, we were able to get through that. We had some very talented people. I got one of my foremen started for us in 1978. Still out there down in Mission Hill slamming out these big, huge monsters. And it's just been quite an adventure. It's one of those things where, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah.
And in our business, when you go through a recession, you have to be able to get to the other side.
Oh, yeah. We remember those ugly days.
Yes,
That
you
was an
do.
ugly
You
time.
keep your talent, you pay your talent, you sacrifice everything you have. If you're not willing to sacrifice in construction as a subcontractor in particular, even as a builder, and sacrifice everything and put it on the line, you should just got out before you even tried it.
Yeah.
So, David, you said, you don't have a college degree. Neither do I, right? I guess we're part of the lucky ones, right?
Yes, we are.
But I noticed you have a real push with workforce management. You like to hire a lot of recent high school grads.
I do.
So talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so I started with workforce development here at the HBA. We really got into it about 12, 13 years ago. Very proud of where we've ended up. We were a lot of talk early on, a lot of big meetings. We all talk in big ways, and like we were this and that. We didn't do nothing. Yeah. And so we finally figured it out. We had Courtney came on board. She was a firebrand, really got things going for us. We started getting active in the schools, which is where we needed to be in the first place. It's boots on the ground. You got to get into schools. You got to talk to these kids.
That's right. And
so I started doing that a lot. We got some kids and took them out on a field trip from Northland Career Center to a big house I was building up there and just outside of Platte City. They dug the heck out of that, man. They thought that was pretty cool.
My nephew graduated from there and is now working with an electrical company and loving it, loving every bit
And
of it.
they are loving
fantastic,
it, So I started working a lot with David Fortmill over there at the Olathe Schools, OATC. They have a wonderful center. They're building a new building where he can have it in. But to get in and talk to those kids and be real about it, tell them that you're going to be graduating. You're in high school now. You need a job. The sooner you get a job, it's better off you're going to be. Learn your independence. Get your own crib. Get your own ride. This is kind of where they need to be at.
Well, it's great to see the interest, right? And I mean, the trades it's not a bad, when did it become a bad word to be in the trades? I don't understand that.
It's getting to be a real
It's
good
not.
word now.
It's a great word.
Yeah,
We have over 300,000 jobs.
Right.
As a society, we fell into this, hey, go to college or life's a failure trap, in the 70s and 80s. And, it's taken us a couple of decades to come out of it.
Yes, it has.
And
Right.
now, the value proposition has completely changed.
It has.
And so, that's what I'm curious about, David, is how has the conversation, gone, starting in the mid 80s when you were framing houses and sourcing talent and making sure your crews had true technicians on it that were doing exceptional work, up until today. How has that conversation changed about attracting that top flight talent?
Well, the one thing about framing is you show up, you're getting trained that very first day.
Sure.
I tell every young man who comes to work, and even a few young women have come to work for me over the years, I started exactly where you're starting. Every person on your crew started exactly where you're starting. Have no fantasies where you are. You're a low person on the totem pole. You got to get out there, go to work. You got to earn it. You got to learn it. Pay attention. Be observant. You want to know how a set of stairs are built? Watch them as you're working. Pay attention to them. Go over there and stand there at the end of the day and look at them. Take your tape out and measure them. Remember math. Wow. We actually were taught math for a good reason. Geometry. My God, Mrs. White, my geometry teacher, I saw her at my mom's 80th birthday. She was over 100, okay? I said, Mrs. White, you remember me? She says, yes, I still play cards with your mother. She played bridge with my mom still. I said, you remember how bad I was in geometry? She says, oh yeah, you were horrible. I said, you'd be proud of me now. I'm a carpenter. I actually owned a company. I said, the theory of that circle finally played out.
Right.
Just somebody else does the math.
Coming out of a textbook, it didn't make any sense, but you know.
But you put it on the physical application, it's pretty cool stuff.
That's right.
Right.
So yes, it's just a matter of getting these kids, more than anything too, it's been about getting to the parents. Creating a thought process for parents that I need to evaluate my child better, to be able to see if they're more apt to work with their hands. Do they like to be outside a lot?
Right.
Or is my kid the first one out the door and finding a mud puddle somewhere?
Right.
That might.
Those are mine.
There's an excavator. He's out there with a shovel digging in the backyard. That's whatever they're apt to do. Do I find my son or daughter down in the dad's wood shop pounding nails on something? Do they have that type of interest? Well, that's where you need to start. Culturing that and saying, this is maybe where my kid needs to go.
Yeah.
It's not the sexiest thing, right?
No.
You're the bones of it, right? And
Right.
then it gets covered up, but without it, it's going to fall, right?
Well, it's a
gonna
pity
fall
they
hard.
cover it up because it's really beautiful before we do.
I bet. So what do you want a homeowner to know about framing? What do they need to know about when they think about the bones of a house?
That we're the most important contractor on your job site.
You say that unbiased.
Because absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, think about
No,
it.
we
Think
can
about
totally
it.
divorce the bias out of it. We'll try.
I may upset a few other contractors out, but think about this. We come out, it's been staked, it's been dug, been poured, foundations, some of them are really good, some of them not so good. First thing I got to do is be able to get that house on that foundation square and level and get it set up right. So that's the first thing that I got to do. Once I got that first deck down
How
one built,
crooked that house would be if I was involved.
yeah, it's probably.
If you hold your head this way,
It looks good from a certain
I've
angle.
always watched how you played the bass there, Keith. You're
right.
you're always kind of leaning
That's a
over
groove,
a little bit.
you know, yes.
It might be slightly
Just gonna feel
slanted.
it.
Slightly to the left.
Yeah, just saying. We set up everything for everybody coming behind us. Every subcontractor trade that comes behind us is set up by us. If we build a good quality house, it's plumb, it's level, it's square, our studs have been crowned, they're straight, and the sheetrock fits right. The electrical, we know, hey, I got a 4-box here, I got to move that stud over. I know where the ductwork's going to go. I know where plumbing has to go. I understand some plumbing codes require that I have 2 studs so them to drill a hole.
There you go.
If I leave one stud there, he drills a hole, inspector comes out, we cut the plumbing out and have to put a second stud there.
Will, he sold me.
All the little things that have to be done. And framing is all about the little things. It's not about the big things. It's about doing all those little things right. And if you do the little things in business the same way, you do the little things right, you stay on top of your game, the big things fall into place. If you're worried about the big thing, you're going to screw it up.
Well, that's kind of a metaphor for everything in life, right? It's the stuff behind the scenes is really what makes the big show, the thing that's right in front of you, actually operate.
Yeah,
You look at a news production. There's maybe 2 people on your screen, but there are hundreds that have made that presentation possible. Exactly. Brad's nodding.
They're like,
Just
who's Brad?
For the record, Brad is nodding along with that. But I think that speaks to the sequential nature of home building, right? What can happen in a build until it's framed and the next tray is ready to go? The answer is nothing. And so you have to accomplish with a high degree of precision the job that you're set out to do, because it will be a cascading effect. If this is messed up and it's not rectified or done correctly the first time, nothing's going to go right for the rest of the build.
Well, you got to see what we're down to do with these houses nowadays. The codes keep evolving. We certainly have had fun with the HBA dealing with energy codes in Kansas City. Kansas City, Missouri, there's a little shout out to them. We're having to learn a lot of different things as we go along, but we also have structural engineers that just keep going on. ICC just keeps going on. And they're about the time you think they can't add anything else to it, they will add something else to it. I've been using these nails for 30 years, and these certain nails have been just fine. And all of a sudden, that nail's no good. And I go back to one of the house I framed 30 years ago, and by God, you're right, it's on the ground. No, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. So, these are the things that we always have to stay on top of, and we have so much more steel, so much more connectors, hold downs, wind codes. There's so much stuff that the framer has to understand and have knowledge of. I put my foreman, a lot of these guys are just like me. They come out of high school, they didn't have the money to go to college, or wasn't for them. They end up getting into the framing trade. Most of us get into it without planning on staying in it, and then we fall in love with it.
Sure. And
the construction process of it. But they have an unbelievable amount of knowledge. Every single one of my guys does.
That speaks to a prevailing misperception about residential construction framing that exists out there, is that it's some kind of fallback position. As if you go into this if you failed or are incapable of doing anything else in the economy. And that's just not the case.
Not at all.
Because, you think about the liability that your company has, and about not accomplishing what needs to be done. And, the fact that, you can't just cover up a big mistake, a big structural mistake with a piece of sheetrock and think that that's not going to come to fruition or come back to haunt you at some point
when
in the
it
future.
cracks.
Yeah, and so...
Well, it's like saying just because it's not the sexiest part of the house, it's not important, right?
I think it is the sexiest part. You ever seen a house when it's all raftered and you got all that geometry up there and the sun's hitting it right?
I bet it is.
And you looking at this thing and it's just beautiful, man. It's just as sexy as it can be, man.
It just gets covered up, is my point.
Then it gets covered up.
Well, it's like looking at an X-ray, right? You're like, oh man, my skeletal structure looks pretty good, and then you see an actual photo of me. It's like, what happened?
Well, you got a problem, Will, because you haven't seen my X-rays. I got so many busted parts on me, it's not even funny. Thank God.
I just had an MRI last week. You guys want to see that? I got to show you that.
You know what? I don't want to violate your HIPAA, so we'll just keep on with the conversation.
We need to get off our health.
We're talking about the backbone
Stay
of
in our
stuff,
lane.
Will.
Crossover episode here
Right.
with WebMD here. I think that's probably a bad idea. So, in your conversations with young people all over the metro, multiple generations of them now, what advice would you give, a parent or a young person that has that kind of aptitude for what it is that you're talking about? How do you start them off to actually get them to take the steps necessary to fall into this line of work?
Well, one of the things we're doing, we started off with an apprenticeship program where we have Oscar working for me, and then we had Guy L a couple of years ago. He came by the office today. It's great to get him out there, an opportunity to do that. But as far as talking to him, it's just, there's an opportunity here. You got to really understand what your aptitude is. Framing's hard work. It's 8 hours of hard, and but there's just a satisfaction, and the parents have to understand that satisfaction of creation, and that satisfaction of taking a print, for me taking it and bidding it, taking it out to the foreman, putting it down, discussing with the foreman, discussing with the superintendent, discussing with the builder, getting the game plan of action, getting everything measured out, getting that first piece of steel in, building the down walls and going forward with it. You can see every day, I would always look back and see that wall I stood up and said, that's the balls. That's pretty cool stuff.
That's a Boston statement.
It's got to be.
It really is.
Because
big time.
You don't hear that out on the street in KC very often.
Only a guy from East Boston like me would know that.
Keith and I bought a Bing. We get it. So, but it's, there's just a massive satisfaction there. And then for me now, I take these kids out and they job shadow me some. C&P been in this town for 59 years in one form or another. And I drive down the street and I go, built that. C&P built that.
No.
Yep.
Go down the plaza, you know, all those stone townhouses across the way on Brush Creek, there's 6 of them. There's 5 of them.
There you go.
You know, and it's just on and on and on of all these different structures just driving around town.
All right.
Everywhere.
Sure.
You built half
I
the
could take
town.
you down. I could take you down the hood. 27 of the Mongolian houses I framed down there.
Yep.
I did wear a sidearm, but we got some jobs done down there and improved the neighborhood. You
All right.
know?
So all these years in framing,
Yes, sir.
give us one really funny, wacky story. You got to give us a good one. Clean for the.
Yeah,
audience,
that's the hard
please.
part is getting it, making it clean.
Cleaned up.
Well, I had a bad day
Spit
one.
shine.
I had a bad day one Saturday, so I went out and worked a Saturday. We were up in the fairways, and I decided to bring my lab with me, Chief, one of my first ones. And so had a couple guys working with me, we were having a good day, and Chief gets away from me. And the developer's over there pouring the driveway for his parents' house that he's over there, and I look over there and Chief's in the middle of the concrete.
Oh no.
Well, he's PO'd pretty bad, you know, so fortunately it was pretty fresh and he was able to smooth it out and get her done. So I hollered at Chief, but he gets back on the deck, he lays down, he's good, and we start wrapping up to go, and damn dog's gone. This is a little bit disgusting, but it's funny. Back in the day, it was really bad about getting porta toilets put on the job sites. So we could get a box and do it in the basement. Chief went down and found one of the boxes,
You asked, Keith.
I did ask.
and he was the one that if you took him out in the woods, he'd find a deer carcass and roll in it, you know. Well, you knew what he rolled in. And so he comes out of there, and I'm debating rather to go ahead and shoot the dog, or should I clean him off? Well, if I shoot him, my wife's going to kill me. And so I got clean him off and ride home with that dog in my truck. It was horrible, just absolutely horrible.
Covered in concrete and other stuff.
Yes, and other stuff. So, you know, these are the things that can happen. As far as framing goes, you know, most of the things that I think one of the best things actually was that time I had to fire an employee, which I never really enjoy. But I had a young man, Marshall, working for me, and he was being late quite a bit and everything, and so he had told the foreman on Monday that he had to go to Clinton because he had to go meet with his lawyer and go to court. Well, I showed up on Tuesday because I couldn't help myself, and I got there 15 minutes. He showed up late. I got there 15 minutes before him, and I said, "So Marshall, how'd your lawyer appointment go yesterday?" Oh, he says, "Went down there, you know, we met the judge, I got a continuance and all that." And I said, well, that's really great because yesterday was President's Day, Marshall. And
He should look at his calendar.
And so the whole crew just, but like I say, I never fire anybody in front of everybody, but the whole crew busted out laughing, and he started laughing too. He's about 19 years old. He says, "I guess I'm fired." I said, "You guessed right."
So you say, raise your hand if you work here. Not so fast.
Got to get your story straight, yeah.
That's
You know,
right.
but we've had situations, lifting walls and things like that, where things can get hairy out there. I mean, you want to practice all the safety you can. We certainly put rails around our stairwells and holes and cover up. You want to make your job site safe as possible. But when you're cranking up a big, huge gable wall, and that thing starts to fall apart a little bit on you, even though you've done your best to construct it right, yeah, baby, you get after it. We also had walls you're lifting up. We call them grunters. When you get to about right here, and everybody is strained to the max, and you got to finish getting that clean and jerk up to the top, finish pushing that thing up. Let me tell you, that's when the whole crew will be hollering. You know, the whole crew will yell. You have to yell and get that primal stuff going to reach down and get that last little bit to get that wall up.
Wow.
So, you know, this is just kind of who we are.
Yeah. Got some Olympians out on the job site.
Yeah. We're strong, you know.
Chariots of fire.
Yeah, East Germans, yeah.
We're very strong, you know. Framers are very strong guys because they're not strong like a bodybuilder, but we're built for endurance. You know, so most of the framers out there are pretty tough and strong dudes.
That's kind of how I eat. I can eat forever. I can't eat fast.
Do you grunt
but I
while
can
you eat?
Yeah, so it depends on where I am in the cycle, right?
Right.
So, you know, David, you talked a little bit about, you know, the sense of satisfaction that you get, you know, kind of driving, you know, some of these young people around to just shadow you and say, yeah, pointing these things out. You know, I think that's so important in today's society, especially, you know, younger generations that aren't necessarily just looking at what they do for a living as a simple transaction. Like, hey, I'm just doing this to get paid. They've got another level of requirement about making a difference. And so, you know, I want you to kind of expound upon that for us a little bit, that sense of satisfaction and that you know, kind of entrepreneurship that you experience.
You know, being an entrepreneur is a tough deal. You have to have a lot of desire. I think for a lot of young people, one of the things I explain to them, especially, I get a chance to work with a lot of guys that might be having some problems, some issues, and you see them, and you have to kind of reach out to them. A lot of times for me, when I have to deal with an employee that way that's struggling or not coming to work like I want them to, I go out and tell them, you know, you're doing a really good job, but you're really failing in these areas. I want you to be successful in my company. Then there's the other ones you just see, they're struggling in life. So I explained to them about passion for your job, having a legacy of what you've done, how you got to have that fire in the belly. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning still. I'm just about turned 66. And I thought about trying to sell the business. And I came home one afternoon, I looked at the wife and I said, oh, hell no. No, I would absolutely lose my mind. Not only that, I'd probably be worth more dead than alive to her at that point.
It's self-preservation.
So now it's self-preservation.
Trick while you're sleeping.
You know, yeah, you know, I went out to kiss her one morning, she was pulling the butcher knife off the counter. And I stepped back and she was looking at me. She said, what's wrong? I said, put the knife down. She says, okay, and puts the knife down. She comes and says, come over and give me a kiss. And she says, what's that all about? I said, you never kiss a Sicilian with a butcher knife. I pissed you off too many times already. Yeah. It's not a good idea.
Got a long memory. Right?
But you get up with that fire in the morning, you know, and you want to go to work and you want to go get things done. You want to go out and work with your bros on that crew. You want to have that camaraderie of going out and working together, creating and building something. I mean,
it's not a job; it's a way of life.
That's a way of life. It is, and you're not going to get rich doing it, but you're going to have a strong body. You're going to have a good group of guys working with you. You're going to develop a reputation. Let me tell you, I have builders all over this town. Hey, how's Sam doing out there? You know, Sam just got through building a 20,000 square foot house. He's on a $5 million house for me now. We're building an S-shaped freestanding stairwell up there.
No kidding.
You know, that's art, baby.
Yeah.
That's our art, you know.
Sure.
That's the whole thing. When we do some of these ceiling features, doing huge groin vaults or oval vaults in ceilings and all these type of things we put in some of these crazy big houses we build, because we become much more of a custom framer. Mm-hmm. You know, the framing industry has really evolved in a lot of different ways, and we got some stuff coming up, and we're going to have to be careful because it can get a little bit ugly here. You know, we got immigration things going on now.
Right.
We also have a lot of crews out there that are immigrant companies. One of the problems, Kansas City is very interesting because we got a lot of builders here. We have a lot of small contractors here, and those crews will work sometimes 6 days a week. They'll work 60, 70 hours a week. They don't pay any overtime. A company like mine, where I run a business, I can't do that. Well, I'll get hung out to dry.
Right.
You know, so it's just a different market than what it is. If that becomes a problem here, what do we do if some of these people go away? You know, I'd really like to see them turn around and say, we need to start running our crews out there more like businesses. The problem with framing is sometimes, as soon as you get a lead man that thinks he knows something, or as we say in the business, knows enough to be dangerous, mm-hmm. He can get some saws, he can get some guns, and compressor, and get some ladders, and some builder will hire him. Oh my God. They don't last long.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to have tenure in this business, you have to learn to run a business. And that's another thing we talk to about these students, is that you have to learn to run a business. Don't cheat. Do things in an honest way. Work hard. Go out, earn it. Build the trust. You know,
Tell the truth.
Tell the truth. We have so much, with all of our builders, we have a lot of trust. I'm not saying work for every builder I've worked for has not gone well for me. Some of them we just didn't jive.
Sure.
But I got others that I've been working for 30 years. Mm-hmm. You know, we jive. And I got new builders. I just picked up 3 new builders in the last couple of months.
No kidding.
I had another one call me today who had worked for a bigger builder, and he's going to go out on his own. I think he can be very successful. He was always really, really good. So he's taken on that entrepreneurial spirit. Mm-hmm. It's going to be interesting to see what I get to do with him. You know, so you have this whole business and work aspect that you have to try to talk to these kids about. I bring them into my office. I explain to them about payroll. So if I have a $30,000 payroll, $9,000 of that's withholding, you know, $5,800, $6,000 of it might be what the employee is, but $2,800 to $3,000 is what the business is putting in.
Right.
If you're out there working for cash, 1099, you're getting screwed. Because that works out to over $1 an hour that I'm putting into that employee on his savings plan. And the government better make sure it's there for him.
Right.
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 You know, it's funny, we've done several of these now, Will, and every business owner that we get to talk to, what's the one thing that we really feel? Pride.
Oh.
The level of pride for whatever they do, it's incredible, incredibly high. And we feel that, like David is just passion and pride.
Again, that's one of the most unique things about the Kansas City residential construction market is that within a couple of degrees of separation, the owner is local. Mm-hmm. You're going to see them out there on a job site eventually. You might not see them every day,
right,
but you're going to see them eventually.
You're going to see me 2-3 times a week on my job site.
There you go. And so,
'cause I got to get away from my office manager.
and you know,
He didn't say office, he said office
manager. I'm talking specifically about an individual. You know, we all got our white whales out there.
Excuse me a minute while I open this Coke.
Yeah.
Ah.
But you know, David, your company is called Construction and Planning Services, but your name is synonymous with your company, and that's where that pride comes from. Mm-hmm. It's like they put, you know, the members of this industry, particularly those that belong to this organization, have put their personal reputations on the line to make sure that this is going to work, and that level of accountability makes Kansas City so unique.
When I bought the business, I really wasn't a business person. And to have to learn it and to be tutored and consulted by Rocky and Cole for all those years trying to learn something, I never felt like I was very good. I made a lot of mistakes, underbid a lot of jobs, took it in the shorts, finished every job I ever did, never walked away from a single job.
There you go.
I mean, if you're going to lose, I've lost over 20 grand and finished the job. That's hard to take, and you just have to keep on going. And finally, some of my compatriots and my wife and my family finally said, David, you can take credit for what you built. It's been a very hard thing for me to do, but we have built a company that is really considered one of the higher end custom framers in Kansas City, and we've had to go that direction. Since Kansas City has so many individual crews, there were a lot of guys out there that were just ace carpenters. I mean, these guys have been framing for 30, 35 years, and they got old. And all of a sudden, they can't get any help anymore. Mm-hmm. And when you get old, you don't want the heavy on you. You want to be able to, you know, I make sure all my older foremen have good young backs behind them. But they use their knowledge. But they get old and they can't find anybody to work and they hang their pouches up. And I knew that was happening. So I said, okay, I need to segue into this and go after these particular builders and get myself in there, prove what our product is. Because it's always about the product. If you put out that product, you get it done every time, it's going to ace. Every time. And they're going to want you back. And I've had some I've worked for at first and didn't struggle a little bit, and then they come back to me. And I'm going blazes with them now.
Don't know what you got till it's gone.
Sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a little higher cost-wise than a lot of companies are. But I'm also running 5, 6 crews that are all legal licensed crews, and they got the talent. They go out there and do their job every day, and they're going to deal with me. They're going to deal with the foreman. They're going to see me on the job site.
And I bet your team has the passion that you have. A lot of them, maybe not all of them.
I think I think my foremen do have it. That's exactly. I worked very hard at building that, Keith.
Right.
You know, I'm sure your team does.
It's amazing. I
look
look
at
them
your
and
rag,
I go,
and it's a beautiful rag.
Yeah.
You know, you got.
Thanks.
My wife can't wait to get it every month. But you have to create that whole company thing.
You can, and you can do that, but you can't make someone care. That comes with finding the right people, watching, keeping the right people, encouraging the correct people to continue to do well and hope that they stay.
I mean, I'm still the boss. So
Right.
They get to talk bad about me when I leave.
Sure.
You know,
It'd be weird if they didn't.
well, I'd be disappointed. I'm not being enough of an a-hole if I haven't done that.
That's some of the unpublished compensation, right? Is to talk bad about the boss. HBA staff excluded. About me. I'm certain of that.
I'm certain.
I'm going to have a drink with them after. We'll find out.
There we go.
Truth serum.
True confessions, right? Yep.
I had a guy I used to work with. He would take the staff out. He was our boss. He was the VP of the company. He would take the staff out without the publisher for drinks, and he'd call it truth serum because he knew he would get the full skinny. He didn't drink a drop. Looked like he was. He got more dirt. That's great. He did. He really did.
Leverage.
Leverage.
that
Well,
is.
here's the problem with framers. You don't have a Christmas party with a bunch of framers.
What do you do?
I know where that's
No,
going.
you don't. No, you don't. Because they all get drunk and they all hit you up for a raise. And they might destroy the place you're in.
Well,
It's
yes.
just,
That's what deposits are for.
yes.
It's more of a shakedown than is what
Right,
you're saying.
right,
you know?
yeah.
No raise, you're not getting your deposit back.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's leverage.
Leverage, exactly.
Dave, it's amazing. I mean, what you've done is amazing. You're a Kansas City legend. It's fun to talk to you today.
Well, thank you guys.
Yep,
I appreciate you very much.
And, on top of the work that you do on job sites across the metro every day for decades, the work you're doing with young people, just giving them that exposure to the opportunities that exist beyond what society has said this is your pathway to success, illuminating those other pathways, whether they choose to go down it or not, they know it exists and there's tremendous value in that. So you've been a workforce development leader in the community for a long time, and we're just grateful that you've lent your considerable storytelling capabilities to the HBA.
It's good to be
talk about
Irish.
to the young people. But any parting words of wisdom before we
Well,
wrap today?
the one thing I will say, about kids nowadays, they have so much influences that are not necessarily good influences, social media. We have fentanyl running around out there in pills. I have two of my very good friends that lost 2 sons. One pill. And hopefully that's starting to get turned around where we keep that crap out of here. When you're losing 70,000 people a year, that's a war. But if you don't go out of high school and you don't get that job right off the bat and you're sitting in your parents' basement and you're playing video games, idle hands cause trouble. I had some of those troubles when I was young. And I don't want any of those kids to go through what I did when you end up homeless like I did at one time, especially on the streets of New Orleans. That's not cool. And so my passion is to make sure that I try to set them on a foot forward to where they understand what their potential is. Understand that they can do anything they want to do if you want to do it bad enough. And that you need to get out and learn your lessons, be willing to fail. Lord knows I've failed a ton. And be able to pit that step forward and become something with yourself. The sooner you do that. The one thing I will say is that when my boys were graduating from college in 1892, I was working in the oil field making $35,000 a year, 40. I was traveling all over the world. They were getting out at that time hoping to make 25.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So they went through 4 years of school, not as much debt in those days, and I was having a blast. pissing away all my money, but I was having a blast.
But at least you had it to lose. Right?
Right.
So, you know, this is what it's about. And this is why we have to start concentrating on our kids out there. It's important that you interact with these teenagers. If you have something you think you can fit into them in any kind of way, talk to them about going forward and being successful. We're seeing Generation Z come up and being a lot more tool handy. They're a lot more interested in getting into trades. The millennials, they were lost. They didn't go that direction at all. I did have some that failed in college and come to work for me. But this is what's important, that we continue to engage with these young people and help them go forward. It makes our city stronger. It makes our country stronger. You know, we have a lot better chance to be America.
Right.
Only in America can a guy like me ended up owning a company like this.
There you go.
That's
American
great.
success story. Well, to you, the listener, if you've enjoyed today's episode and would like to learn more about how you can be involved in shaping the future of this podcast in this industry, we hope you'll visit kchba.org/podcast. Drop us a note. Let us know what you want to hear about in future episodes. We can answer your questions. We can address your concerns, all of those things. But with that...
A big thank you to McCray Lumber and Nebraska Furniture Mart for sponsoring today's podcast. And a huge
I got
thank
one
you to
more
David
thing.
Elliott. Yes.
My wife had a great saying. Don't teach a kid to live in your basement. Teach a kid how to remodel your basement.
There you go. Yeah. You think it's too dark down here? Let's go.
Let's go.
All right. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time.
Next time.
Next time.